Hello YouTube, this is Eric from Coder Snacks. Today, we're going to talk about the game of interviewing. Let's get started. When we interview at a company we want to work for, it doesn't feel like a game. It's stressful, and whether we get an offer or not, it can lead to serious life changes. Some tension can improve performance, but negative mental loops like how poorly you're doing while staring at a blank whiteboard trying to imagine what data structure could possibly help you solve this problem in less than O of n squared time, and imagining negative consequences like I'm not going to get the job, I'm going to look like an idiot, I'd better start preparing my resume. These things do not help you perform better in the moment. To help fight this, think of interviewing as a game to try to reduce the pressure of the situation. That's our topic for this video. First, what happens in a coding interview? One or more interviewers will ask you coding or design questions. You'll answer those questions the best you can. The interviewers will take your answers and how you answered and decide whether or not to hire you. Usually, the interviewer has some criteria they use to reach that decision. Things such as apparent technical ability and how skillfully you answered the question. But other things help, or more accurately, if you do poorly, can cause you to lose points. Things like enthusiasm, seeming smart, being easy to get along with. Their criteria won't be fixed or numeric. The interviewer is probably not saying, "There's a bug, -2 points." But it's useful to pretend they are. You can imagine yourself trying to score as many points as possible in technical ability and not lose points. You can't know the interviewer's real criteria beforehand, but you can have an idea of what interviewers look for. Try to score as many points as possible. Treat it like a game. Take away the pressure. We'll break the video into 3 topics: pre-game preparation, game day tactics, and post-game learning. Pre-game is about preparation, learning, improving. We want to improve our skills as much as possible. Incremental improvements stack up over time and we become stronger and stronger. To improve, we need to find a weak point and improve it. This is difficult. People don't enjoy looking at their weaknesses. When we practice our strengths, we feel successful. Practicing things we're bad at can make us feel weak. But to become stronger, we need to be willing, even eager, to fail. Failing is when we learn best. We need to make failure as cheap and easy as possible. The best way I know to do this is deliberate practice. There are 4 steps. 1. Find a weak point and set an achievable stretch goal to improve it. 2. Set a timer and try your hardest to reach the goal in the time provided. 3. Get immediate feedback and find out what you did well or poorly. And 4. Reflect and repeat. By doing some deliberate practice daily, you can get better surprisingly quickly. It is far more effective than just randomly practicing. But concretely, how do we do this deliberate practice, and what should we be studying or learning? Generally, we want to be better engineers, but if you're watching this video, you probably also want to prepare for interviews. But some useful software engineering topics aren't really useful for interviews, and vice versa. There are many ways to improve your engineering skill: learning new frameworks, reading books on engineering and design, building more difficult projects, improving your skills with your favorite editor, and more. But these won't help your interviewing skill. There are ways to improve both overall software engineering skill and interviewing skill: studying data structures and algorithms, practicing speaking and communication, studying interesting computer science problems. Unless we're studying specifically for interviews, spend the vast majority of your time in these areas. Studying for interviews only helps with interviews. If you're a strong engineer, you'll be quite sought after, despite any lack of interview skills. But if you have an interview in the coming month, interview preparation will help. Especially if you're early in your career, being strong at interviews will help you get better jobs. That's where we will focus today. Before we dig in, many people think these coding interviews, where you write code on a whiteboard, are horrible. Outside of this video, I might agree with you. Deciding to decline these kinds of interviews is a reasonable choice. But many companies perform these interviews for valid reasons. Additionally, you can learn a lot preparing for them. That's what this video is about. If you dislike a company's interview process, weigh that in when choosing where to work. If you feel like this is asking you to dance, monkey dance, don't do it. But for interviews at Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, well, You know what you're getting into. Let's prepare for it. Enough setup, how do we study for coding interviews? When I prepare for coding interviews, I start with implementing data structures. Implementing data structures lets me understand what's going on under the hood. For example, when you implement a dictionary, you learn how it actually works, why the runtime complexities are what they are, and you can use those concepts in harder problems. For example, I used to ask an interview question where the solution was using a hash function to detect duplicate files. Then, I'd ask how big the hash value returned from the hash function should be. I didn't want a specific size, I wanted to hear about the trade-off between collisions and storage space. If you've studied dictionaries, you can reason about those trade-offs. But if dictionaries are a magical black box where you put in items and take out items in O of 1, the problem is more difficult. Then, I practice interview questions. There are many sources for questions. The best sources are places with forums where other people discuss their solutions. This is useful for getting feedback even if you don't post. We'll discuss that more shortly. There are many ways to do practice problems. The two we'll focus on are studying on a computer using your normal development environment and studying in interview conditions, for example using a whiteboard. Most of your practice should be in your normal development environment. We want our practice loop to be as fast as possible. Working in your normal environment takes about half the time of a whiteboard, letting us practice twice as many problems and learn twice as much. Just before the interview, however, make sure to practice some in interview conditions, such as using a whiteboard. If you don't have a whiteboard, and who does really, a blank sheet of paper is a good replacement. When you're doing this practice, record yourself, either in video or voice, for further review. Practice narrating your thought process and what you're doing as you write in code. We've discussed interview practice at a high level. Let's get concrete. What should a study session look like? Let's go back to the steps of deliberate practice. First, find a weak point and set an achievable, reachable stretch goal to improve it. Search the previous two videos for an area you're weak at, a data structure you're less familiar with, or an algorithm you're not sure how to implement. Then, set a goal that is difficult but possible to achieve and some constraints. For example, I'm going to implement a dictionary using lists in 30 minutes using an IDE and full internet access. Or, I'm going to solve this problem on HackerRank in 45 minutes on a piece of paper and no internet access. A short time frame sets a defined end to the exercise and additionally lets you feel the pressure of an interview in a more comfortable environment. The main constraints I think about are how much time, what environment, and what resources am I allowed to use. When you're studying an area for the first time, allow more resources and time. As you get stronger and more confident, allow yourself less resources and time. The first time you implement a dictionary, you might allow yourself an hour and full internet access. At the end, when you know it better, maybe 10 minutes and your IDE. Second, set a timer and try your hardest to reach the goal. Within your time and constraints, work hard on the problem without distraction, solving it as best you can. When you think you have a solution, write tests and pass them. Consider edge cases, try to improve your solution, use less code, make it more robust, and so on, until your time is up. 3. Get immediate feedback and find out what you did well or poorly. This can be the hardest part, both mentally and practically. If you have a study partner, show them your answer and get feedback. Otherwise, use forums and the internet. Find other people's solutions. Compare their code to yours. How is yours better? How is yours worse? If you're using a site with an online judge, such as HackerRank or TopCoder, did you pass all the tests? Listen to your recording and see what mistakes you made there. Now that you're not under time pressure, look at your code again. Do you see anything new? You want to get as much feedback about your code as you can, both positive and negative. Not to beat yourself up, but to continue to find weak points so that we can reflect, and repeat. Look at your feedback. What went well? What went poorly? What did you forget? Did you forget how to make 2D arrays? Did you forget how double list comprehensions work? Did you use len equals 0 instead of not? Did you forget some itertool method? What do you want to work on? Make notes. If there was little to improve on, find another area to work on. If there was a lot, maybe you need to split the problem and focus on a smaller part. Sometimes it just takes multiple sessions to learn something. That's fine. That's great. Prepare another session and repeat. Occasionally, come back to these notes. Check if you need review or see how you're growing. It feels great to see old notes and realize you've grown past them. Additionally, sometimes shortly before the interview, do simulated interviews. If you know someone who can give you interview problems at a whiteboard, set up some practice sessions. Otherwise, use sites like HackerRank, Interviewing.io, LeetCode, or similar to do timed interview practice on problems you don't know. Before we move on to interview tactics, here are a few more pre-interview tactics. If you're traveling for the interview, get to the hotel early. If possible, practice how you're going to get to the interview. Walking, taking your rental car, public transit. Know exactly where you're going in the morning so you're not worried about finding it. Getting a good night's sleep the night before is crucial. This is difficult. It's natural to be nervous or think getting a few more study hours in will help, and you can sleep when you're dead or whatever. But 4 or 5 coding interviews in a day is draining, intense mental effort, and you will make mistakes. Don't amplify those mistakes by being tired. Getting good sleep in a strange hotel bed somewhere takes preparation. Get to the hotel early, take a warm bath, don't drink caffeine in the afternoon, bring a relaxing, not coding, book. Don't look at screens before bed, whatever you know helps you. Make it part of your preparation. Prepare yourself to get a good night's sleep. In one set of interviews I did, for reasons involving the planning fallacy, I got to my hotel very late and only got 3 hours of sleep the night before. In my first interview, the interviewer asked a simple string problem that should have taken 5 minutes. Instead, I had a clever idea that I wasted 10 minutes of time on before needing to wipe it all away to write the more straightforward answer. That was not a great interview. Learn from my mistake. Another tactic, spend about 30 to 60 minutes in the morning warming up. Do some simple problems you're quite familiar with. Get into a code writing mindset and get a few successes in the morning. Nothing difficult, very simple stuff. Get to the site early, at least 30 minutes. This way, if you're a bit late, you have some buffer room and you don't have to be rushed. You don't want to actually go in that early. Being half an hour early for your interview is pretty awkward. But you can get near the site and wait in your car or get breakfast nearby or read a book to relax. The purpose is to ensure you're not late. Make sure to be on time. No excuses. Finally, keep in mind, this is a game. You've practiced and prepared for it. Your focus now is getting high scores. There's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to be scared of. Focus on your best performance. We'll discuss that more in the next section. Now we're in the interview. We want a high score. How do we do that? Let's break down a typical coding interview. Interviews vary widely, but generally there are 3 parts: the introduction, the coding portion, and the outro. Let's dig in. The introduction is where you meet your interviewer. Good interviewers will ask you a question or two to chat a little and warm you up. Your goal is to give a good first impression and start the interview well. I'm not ever saying to be fake. Focus on being your best you. Don't force being cheerful, don't guess what the interviewer wants to hear, but don't be nervous or distracted with your last interview or worried about what they're going to ask. Be relaxed, calm, enjoy yourself. Do you like programming? You're meeting with another person with similar interests. They're going to ask you interesting questions. You're going to get to learn something awesome. Have fun with it. This approach seems naive to some people. Of course I'm worried. This person is going to decide whether we get a job and I have bills to pay. Yes, I know, me too. But are you going to do better if you're having fun or if you're anxious? Focus on the positive parts and let your best self come forward. The interviewer will usually ask a question or two here, things like, tell me about a favorite project, or tell me about your favorite CS data structure or algorithm, or tell me about a favorite hobby of yours, or tell me something interesting about yourself. The real question they're asking is, are you interesting to talk to and work with? They want to find something you're interested in and how interested you are in it. This can be anything. Did you write a web spider to get a corpus of Japanese text because you're really interested in studying Japanese? Did you write a script to text you when some class you wanted to join had openings? Are you interested in sound fractals? Talk about some project you've done and why it's interesting to you. What did you learn from it? What was weird about it? Have a few of these prepared, get excited, talk about them, and shake off the interview jitters. Show off your best you. Next, on to the coding section. You've practiced, so you should be ready to answer their questions. Remember, this is a game. Your goal is to score as many points as you can. Do your best on each question, and if you have difficulty, there are many reasons that can happen. Don't stress out. In any coding interview, some luck is involved. When you play a game, there's randomness that makes the game easier or harder. For example, in Scrabble, you get tiles that are easier or harder to make words from. Similar things happen in many games and in interviews too. You can't study everything, and they may ask you something you don't know well. People have different backgrounds, interests, ways of interacting, and you might not mesh well with a person. You can have a good mental day or not. We can influence these things. We can study more, we can work on our empathy and communication skills, we can come to the interview rested and warmed up. Even so, there will be variance. All we can do is use our skills to score our best in this particular instance of the game. Concretely, what can we do? It's not all luck, right? Let's talk tactics for scoring well in a coding interview. First, find the best solution you can. Begin with a brute force solution and then improve by finding inefficiencies. Many candidates believe giving the brute force solution is a bad idea, but it's better than no solution. Even better, say, this is the brute force solution, let me try to improve it. If you can't improve, try to find interesting ideas. Maybe you can represent the problem with a different data structure and see if there are algorithms you can apply. For example, can you turn the input into a graph and then search the graph? Work through some examples yourself and see if an algorithm comes to mind. Ask questions about what you should do for various inputs. Solve a simpler version of the problem and build on that. See if you can break the problem into subproblems and then use recursion. Always be coding. That is, always be generating or trying ideas or writing code. Show your thought process and how you solve unknown problems. Overall, the ways to gain points are simple. Solve the problem, find interesting ideas. But there are many ways to lose points. Let's discuss how to avoid losing points in somewhat random order. First, don't spend time worrying about how you're doing. It's impossible to know. You're being scored in comparison to other people doing the same problem with the same person. If this interviewer likes asking hard questions, other candidates will also struggle. You'll do better on easier problems, but everyone else will too. You don't know how other people did on a given problem, making it impossible to know how you're doing. In one interview, I was asked to solve a problem by myself on a computer they provided and call the interviewer when I was finished. I wrote a brute force solution in about 45 minutes, and I couldn't think of a better solution. I called the interviewer in, discussed the solution I wrote. He asked me how I could improve it, and I didn't have anything substantial. After some pleasantries, he walked me out. Walking back to the hotel, I knew I failed. I could only write a brute force solution. I couldn't improve on it. It took me 45 minutes. There's no way I'm getting the job. I got the job. I found out later when I was an interviewer for that company that few people did better than brute force and many didn't solve it at all. Additionally, I used Java to solve it. I didn't know Python at the time, and most Java solutions took 2 hours. They were impressed that it only took me 45 minutes. The point of this story is, even if you feel you're doing poorly, you may be doing well on a hard problem. Don't get discouraged. Just go for the high score. Next, have a good attitude about the question. It's easy to get frustrated and lash out at the perceived unfairness of a hard problem. Alternately, the problem may be simple, and you may think, I have years of experience or college degree, and I've written these huge projects, and they want me to implement some 4-line function? This is beneath me. Don't do this. The interviewer is deciding whether or not to hire you. If you're sitting there calling their problem dumb, that's an easy no. The interviewer wants to see your skills. If they're asking you a hard question, they want to see how you'll do in a difficult work situation. We have to solve hard problems all the time. For an easy question, they may be asking you to qualify yourself. There are people with years of experience who can't write simple programs by themselves. Maybe there are interesting edge cases. Maybe the simple problem leads to a harder problem. You don't know. Just show them your best skills. If a problem is boring to you because it's trivial, make it interesting. Try to solve it extremely cleanly. Think about edge cases or scaling or the API design or anything. Every problem can be a challenge. Look at my video on mean, median, and mode. It's simple, but there's depth to it. Assume the interview problem you're being asked is similar. The interview is a game. If you're given an easy problem, go for the high score. Don't score 0 by complaining. Afterwards, if you want, you can always decline the offer. Next, don't code immediately. Ask questions. Be sure you understand the problem. It's easy to lose points by trying to answer the wrong question. Additionally, many interviewers dislike candidates immediately coding without analysis. It appears hasty and cowboyish. Additionally, by asking questions, you can discover what the interviewer is looking for. For example, if you ask about the input size and the interviewer says 20 or 30 items, n squared or even n to the fourth approaches are possible. But if the interviewer says millions or billions of elements, n squared is probably not going to work. Here are some questions you can often use. What are the types of the input? What should we return? What are some example inputs? How is this code going to be used in the larger system? Additionally, you can make up an example and verify your answer with the interviewer. Spending 1 or 2 minutes doing this at the beginning of an interview can save you a lot of pain. At some point, ask your interviewer if they want to see code. Sometimes an interviewer will want to do more design work or want you to find a better answer. Asking if they want code at a certain point in the interview helps you whether they want it or not. When you code, if you're not given a language to use, pick the best language you can. Pick the one you know best, or the language you think fits the problem. I personally use Python for interviews by default because you can write compact code, but use the language you know best. You'll write better code more quickly. Narrate as you're coding. You can't get credit for things you don't say, and you can lose points for seeming stuck, even if you're not. This takes practice. It's not a natural skill for most people. Don't bluff while interviewing. Say if you don't know something. It won't disqualify you. From the interviewer's standpoint, do you want to work with someone who will make up an answer when they don't know? It's better to say, I don't know, but here's how I'd find out, than to make up an answer. If you don't know a function name or language functionality, you can always say, I don't remember this function name, but I think there's a function that does X, and I'm going to call it Y. Is that okay? And then add a to-do for later. Interviewers know that coding on a whiteboard is unnatural, and we use tools and search engines to help us. But if you write a function name and don't say that, it just looks like you're wrong. If you reach a dead end while coding and you have a better solution in mind, it feels bad, but don't fear starting over. Don't throw good time after bad. It's tempting to try patching your solution, but this rarely works and it usually looks dirty. Consider the time you spent as an investment in finding a better solution. Remember the interview from earlier where I started over after a clever solution? Starting with a straightforward solution is best, but restarting was better than writing a bunch of code patching my clever answer. You can't fix the past. Score as many points as you can from where you currently are. When you're stuck, discuss how you would solve the problem normally, like what you might search for example, and ask for a hint. It's better to lose a few points for asking for a hint than to sit stuck for 30 minutes and lose a lot more. Next, effective whiteboard use is underrated. You can practice this on a piece of paper. Many people begin right in the middle of the whiteboard and struggle when they reach the bottom and start drawing arrows all over. Don't do this. Code usually looks like a triangle. We have loops and so forth that push the code away from the left in the middle. Start on the far left side as high as comfortable. Then give yourself a column of space for auxiliary functions or if the code gets long. Finally, in the upper right or lower right, you have space for drawings. Here's a sample layout. Speaking of auxiliary functions, try to use functions in your code when you're repeating code, when there's a part you're unsure about, you can turn it into a function and write it later, or when code makes sense as a function. Write the function call in your code, write the function header off to the side, and to do it. Afterwards, come back to the to-do parts if the interviewer is interested. This is only a sample. Just use your space effectively. Needing lots of arrows makes you look disorganized. Steve Yegi's article on interviewing, I'll put a link in the description, also recommends bringing thin-tipped whiteboard markers to increase your effective space. This is a great idea, especially if you're already using them for your own practice. At the end, you'll have some code. Create some simple test cases and walk through them by hand. It's difficult, but try to look at the code with fresh eyes. Don't assume it works the way you think. Look for off by one errors, incorrect conditionals, and so forth. Think about invalid input. Look for errors you've made frequently in practice, and if you don't know what errors you make frequently in practice, do some practice and find out. Finally, point out code cleanup opportunities and do them if your interviewer wants. After the coding, you'll have an outro. Your interviewer will usually ask if you have any questions for them. Have a few prepared, things you'd like to know about the company. I'll put a link in the description for examples, but don't blindly pick off this list. Find something you're interested about that will help you decide whether you want the job. Take time to mentally decompress and reset, especially if you feel you did poorly. Going into the next round beating yourself up can only make you lose points. Remember, you don't know how you did. The problem may have been hard, you may have done well compared to other candidates. Assume you did well and prepare yourself for the next round. Go for the high score every round. Alright, interviews are done, and now you're waiting for the results. While you're waiting, the information you've gained during the interview is valuable, and you should use it. You will usually not get direct feedback from interviewers, but there are many things you can do with the experience. First, take note of mistakes you made. What did you forget? What errors did the interviewers point out? What do you wish you had asked, or what projects do you wish you'd discussed? Prepare rounds of deliberate practice to focus on those mistakes. Next, look at the problems your interviewers asked you again. Try solving them away from the pressure of the interview. Also, search for those problems on the internet. You can often find discussions of problems on sites like CareerCup, Glassdoor, HackerRank, and so forth. If you find them, look at other answers. How did you do better? How did you do worse? Learn something from the other answers. Interviews give you practice that is difficult to obtain in other ways. Take advantage of them, whether you get an offer or not. Now it's time for my outro. This is a lot of advice, and you won't use it all. I don't always remember all of it. But use what you can to get the best score you can. Be the best candidate and programmer you can be. With that, Coder Snacks will be on hold for a while I work on some other projects. Thank you for your views and feedback. I still want to answer your questions and help you in any way I can. If you have questions or comments or things you want covered in the future, let me know in the comment section below. And if you found this video useful, like the video and subscribe for any videos I might make in the future. And thanks for watching Coder Snacks. See you next time.